All right. The Parasite Killer, also known as the MCP spectrum, which we know is why I found a better name called the Parasite Killer, because that sounds easier to remember and easier to say. Why I use this is to create a formula to calculate the trajectory of an ally based on the utility of their worth. So, what the hell does that mean? I like having allies that are productive, but there are a couple of different categories of allies, some of which, the majority of which, are not very productive. And we're going to go over an easy way of assessing where their productivity is and therefore their utility. Sometimes we have an ally that has either eroded to the point or has been connected to so ineffectively that they make themselves or conduct themselves as parasites. And that is not just a derogatory term, it's actually a very descriptive term that we use to comment on the utility of their connection. And I'll make a lot of sense going forward. So when we connect with people, the whole reason we have an alliance, and you can go to TRIBALNOMICS and see this, the purpose of an alliance is to create synergy. You apply something to a relationship, your ally applies something, and both of you get back more than you invest. The only way that's possible if there is something that exists after the connection that does not exist before. This is why we drive alliances together in the first place. So when you have an alliance that, and I'm going to bring this, it's on the sheet, I'm going to put it here. When you have an alliance that is synergistic, it is called a mutual alliance. And it's a mutualistic alliance, and it is one that creates a synergy. And this is what we should be looking to design. And rather than put a bunch of words, I'm going to go the emoji route. Right? Plus this. Now, when you have a mutualistic alliance, both people are happy. Both people are contributing to the alliance, but both people are getting a return. And that synergy has both people happy as a result. And the happiness, we could say, is just both people are functional in the relationship. Well, there's a point where if only one person starts benefiting from the alliance, the other person may not benefit, but it still may not cost them anything. So I'll give you an example of that. If I have 100 students in my school on the mat, and one of them isn't paying, I'm not necessarily going to notice, because it's not like I need less mats now, or I need to lower the light a little bit, it's really, you could add somebody who's not paying to that mat, and it's not really costing me anything, right, that I would notice. They could still be experiencing training, but I wouldn't even recognize it, right? So if you have a movie theater, and you have a movie theater and it sits 100 people, and 85 people show up, and they pay, and you get the money for 85 people, and one guy sneaks in the back, so you have 86. It doesn't cost you anything to have him in there. You're already paying for the place. You're already showing the movie. So when you lose the synergy on both sides, when you lose it from one side, but the other one's still getting something out of it, we now say that that relationship, that alliance, has devolved into commensalism, or it has become a commensal relationship. And the way that we would reflect that here is one person is still happy. But now the other person, and this is usually you, is just unaffected, unemotional, detached, doesn't even notice. So both people contribute, both people benefit. Both people contribute, one person benefits. So there's no synergy experienced by the other one, but there's not a cost being accrued by him either. In the example of the movie theater, if I had 85 people in my movie theater and the 86th guy came in and suddenly I noticed an increase in a bill, it's like, oh, wait a minute. That just cost me something. Or he comes in and he takes a popcorn. Right? There's one less popcorn. Well, now it's costing me something. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody being there and it just doesn't cost you anything to have him there, even though they're still benefiting. I would go so far as to say one of the biggest mistakes when accommodating, permitting commensal relationships to exist, one of the biggest positions that we wind up having or taking is, what's the big deal? It's not costing me anything. I don't care. Let him do it. Doesn't matter. Like, doesn't cost. And we look at the alliance in terms of it costing us anything. Oh, it doesn't cost us anything, so who cares? Right? And that is what a commensal relationship is. So now, what happens now when one ally is still benefiting, but now the other ally is experiencing a cost? This individual is now a parasite. So a parasite is where one ally is benefiting at a cost or harm to the other. Now, by the way, these terms are taken from biology, right? These are scientific, these are biological terms, right? Science and shit, right? Because they figured this out a long time ago with organisms. And they classify the relationship between organisms using these terminology. I discovered it matches and overlays perfectly with the dynamic of how an ally erodes into a parasite, right, in a relationship. So when you have, and if we were going to designate what this person is, we'd call him a schmuck, right? So that is one of the goals of this talk, is to tell you to not be a schmuck. Because the thing about the parasites, they are burning through resources. So somebody had asked me, well, what's the difference between, or isn't parasite just a trader, just an in-tribe trader? Which, if you follow tribalnomics, traders are either an enemy or a fool. The answer is no, because traders are trying to destroy the identity of the ally, right? They're enemies because they want to end the person. They're fools because they're going to get everybody killed. But there is an end in mind when looking at how a trader behaves themselves in tribe. A parasite wants you to live forever because you're an endless amount of resources for him. But you could say even biologically, like sometimes there are, and I don't want to go down this biological, rabbit hole, but it's like there's an argument that fetuses are parasites, to the mother's body, like where it's a one-way thing. But obviously we know that's a little different. Most of the time when we're talking about this guy has a parasite or this dog has a parasite or whatever, it's like something that, like, get it the fuck out of here. Why? Because it is also putting a ceiling on the potential of the host, right? Which would be the more scientific term instead of schmuck, right? Schmuck is what, like a Yiddish word for host. Right? No, it's not. I'm just making shit up, right? But right, so I'll put it in parentheses, right? This is my little bit of professionalism is compelling me to put. I probably should have wrote in the opposite way, but whatever. So the idea of it is, We don't want to design relationships that we wind up hosting parasites. Because now the thing is, because they take resources, but they never generate resources, we have to create resources and accumulate resources just so we can take care of them. Right? So let's talk about the dynamic or how this erosion occurs. Right? So the thing about commensal allies, this is where everybody messes up a relationship. Right here on step 2. They allow this to happen. Once they discover it's happening, they allow it to stay running. They allow it to stay functional, or not the right word. They allow it to exist, right? And they accommodate it. They, oh, what's the big deal? I'll just let them whatever. Doesn't cost me anything. Without being pressured to become synergistic or mutualistic, all commensal allies will devolve to become parasites. Because why not? Why wouldn't they? They're at least, and this is either consciously or otherwise, at some point, they're going to have some other claim to the resources that they're giving, and they're going to see, well, let's see if I still keep getting what I'm getting. Right? And if they keep getting the benefits of the connection, and they find out that they don't have to any longer contribute, why would they start contributing if left unchecked? It's not that they wouldn't, but the people who have that wherewithal probably wouldn't have been parasites in the first place. So in other words, it's a bad design to allow and accommodate commensal allies to exist. So what do? When we notice that either an alliance has been formed by accident in a commensal fashion, or we've discovered that one of our former synergistic, mutualistic allies has devolved into a commensal relationship, the pressure needs to be applied immediately to get them back up to step 1, to stage 1, right? To mode 1. Because if you're not happy, it's just a matter of time before you're going to be sad, right? Before now you're going to realize this is actually costing you money to keep this person connected to you. I'll say money, really resources more generally, right? So there's a difference between, hey, I have a martial arts school, I'm going to give you a free trial. What's a free trial? It's a class, it's a week, it's a month. I could never lose the context of what that is and why I'm giving it to them. So if I say, hey, you could try the class out for a month, and somebody comes and says, I want to try it out for a month, and we ask, well, when are you working, during the day or at night, finding out when to schedule the trial, and they say, we're not working. We say, well, why don't you come back when you have a job? Oh, well, you said it was a free week. Yeah, but obviously I'm doing this because I'm trying to get people to join the school. Like, what the fuck are we talking about right now? So what they're doing is, hey, I heard you have a commensal trial class. And they don't have a job, so it's like, yeah, so they're going to be parasites before long. They don't even have the ability to become mutualistic. Right? So without the pressure to have commensal allies become mutualistic, they're always going to devolve into parasites. So that pressure has to be applied. Right? Whenever we have a commensal relationship, we need to apply the pressure to get them into mutualistic. When somebody eventually devolves, or like it's always going to happen. Like left unchecked, commensal allies will become parasites. When they become parasites, there's no negotiating with parasites. There's no let me invest in them and fix them, and there is none of that. So what is the action or the process of removing parasites? Because that is what we're going to act on. Now, mind you, if we are pleasantly surprised by when instigating the removal of a parasite, it changes its own ways, that's fine. But we're not going to invest in that outcome because it's a bad investment. And more often time than not, when somebody has comfortably slid into a parasitic relationship with you, they're not going back. They're not going back. They'd rather have, if they're going to invest, they'd rather invest in somebody new. That's the way that works. So you want to remove the parasites. Number one, you set the criteria. Hey, I noticed that you haven't been paying and you're taking up space and time of the instructors, and like you got to start paying or you can't train. Oh, what's the big deal? I'm just, what does it matter if I'm here? Like, I can't have a school full of people who aren't paying. You need to pay. If you're not paying, then you're trying to sabotage my ability. Like, at some point, somebody's have to pay attention to you instead of somebody who's paying. Like, it is parasitic in nature. I may not use that word, but so you set the criteria. Either you pay or you don't train. And what you do is you allow them to self-select. I don't throw people out. I've thrown people out before, my school, but that's not my thing. My thing is always, this is how you got to act in order to be right. The overwhelming majority of time, they're like, nope, I'm not going to do that. If that's your choice. And the reason why we set the criteria and then allow them to self-select is because it gives us the opportunity for three, where we could build bridges, if possible. Now, what's the argument for building bridges? This guy was training, he wasn't paying, he was getting away with it. Like, fuck that guy. Why do we want to build a bridge? We should tell him to go fuck himself. Well, here's the thing. Just how many people are you going to tell to go fuck themselves? Right? There's a phrase that I've been using for years, don't populate the other side of the battlefield. I want to end, ironically, almost in like some sort of commensal fashion, where it doesn't cost each one of us anything. It's like, it's okay, because when you build a bridge, you're basically downgrading the alliance to the point where it's functional and doesn't cost anybody anything more than what they're getting back. All right? So that's why we want to allow them to self-select. But here's the thing, there's no negotiating. There's no waiting for a parasite to change its ways. It's like an abused wife. She's getting smacked around by a piece of shit husband. And she's like, he's getting better. It's like, no, he's not. No, he's not. He used to slap me 8 times. Now he only slaps me 7 times. It's like, that's not progress. That's fatigue, maybe. That's like, it's like you're tracking it the wrong way. He is, at that point, he's got to go. So there's just a point where when somebody has devolved into a parasitic relationship, because chances are you won't make an alliance that's parasitic by design. Right? Now, you might make the mistake, and I could see like in business, this could happen, where somebody makes an offer that is literally too good to be true because it's actually sabotaging them. I'll give you an example of that in my experience. I used to have an offer whereby somebody could join the school, train for a free month. It's like if they signed up for the year, they would get a free month. That free month could be their first month, which meant they could train. They wouldn't have to pay until the second month. My numbers signing people up went through the roof. Nobody fucking paid. Second month came around. No. We had one guy that said he was never even in the school. Somebody used my identification. I was never in that school before. It's like, we literally have you on a security camera. Like, you're a liar. All right, I'll pay. So the problem was I had a parasitic offer, it turns out. I might as well, the headline of that offer should have been Parasites, free training. So then what happened was part of my business model was collections. I didn't start a martial arts school to be in the collections business, but my offer created parasites. It didn't ask them for enough to stop them from becoming parasitic. So sometimes we can have offers that are too good to be true, right? So you'll have some individual, I didn't plan on putting this in this talk, but I'll include this because I think it's valuable. The idea of a loyal person. The concept of a loyal person could be a man or a woman. A loyal person is somebody who creates a self-debt when invested in. A loyal person is somebody who creates a self-debt when invested in. So what do I mean by that? When somebody's a loyal person, if you invest in them in any way, they compel themselves to reciprocate. They compel themselves to give you a return on that investment. It is a self-debt because it wasn't agreed upon between the two of you. That would actually be a debt, right? But if I say, hey, loyalty is an investment, not a debt, well, how then do good people, I consider everybody in this room to be a good person. I have experiences with all of you. Like, how would we call somebody a loyal person then? If loyalty's an investment, not a debt. It's like, oh, you did this all for me. Of course I'm going to do this stuff for you. It's like, yeah, but loyalty is an investment, not a debt. Why do I feel compelled to do this? Because we're loyal people. When people invest in us, we put a debt on ourselves to reciprocate, to give them a return on investment. Like, I like the idea of being a good investment for people. I like when people are like, you know what? I remember when I negotiated a lease 2 locations ago for the school. On paper, I was not the guy to rent to. Like, my numbers were not impressive. Sat with the landlord, and I just had to talk with him. And I'm like, listen, this is where my head is. I got a family, it's growing. And I just presented myself. And at the end of it, he said, you know what? I like you. I'm going to do it. Let's do it. I explained to him how compelled I am by my nature to make good on the agreement I was making with him. Years later, like over a decade later, I wound up leaving the spot. He and I are still on good terms. Right? So when you deal with loyal people, they're people who basically pressure themselves out of this state. And that's the relevance to this. A loyal person, they're almost averse to being a parasite. Like, it's hard for me to let people buy me food my whole life. Because I always feel like, I don't want them to think that I'm taking advantage. I don't want them to think. So it's hard for me to let people buy me food. Which I have to sometimes, I gotta let people do good things, nice things for me because they want a way to give back to me. But that's because I consider myself to also be a loyal person. I don't want somebody to ever say, oh yeah, he took advantage of me and we wound off, with all this and I got nothing and he misrepresented. Like, I've seen a lot of people quit on me. A lot of people quit on themselves with me. I haven't seen me ever quit on somebody else. Right? And that's one of the things I live my life by. So when we're dealing with loyal people, which is why we want formulas that connect us to loyal people, because we don't have to have as strong of a system to set the criteria for parasites. But if you're, it's like, yeah, you want to get into the nightclub business, you want to, be a drug dealer, you want to be a porn producer, you're going to start dealing with people that by nature are looking to be parasites. And you better have good formulas for removing them, because that's how you got to deal with them. Right? Any questions on this? Make sense? My good. Let's end it there. It's the first time I've used the word schmuck in one of